Gacha games are known to follow anime tropes almost religiously as a means of boosting recognition and popularity. We have the gentle quiet types like Shorekeeper, Mornye, and Jinhsi, the cute bubbly must-protect girls like Verena and Dawncore, the happy-go-lucky cheerful ones like Jinshin and Shisha, the serious calculated types like Baizhi and Sanhua, the more sultry ones like Cantarella, Changli, and Yinlin who know they're good-looking and often use that to their advantage, among many others. One striking personality archetype that's been explored in Wuha very early on was the classic yet popular trope of the crazy girl through Danjin whose cheerful demeanor belies her berserker fighting style, and of course everyone's favorite meme girl, Camellya. Aside from being the living embodiment of mood, Camellya was one of the game's more attention-grabby characters owing to her very apparent yandere tendencies, but also her gameplay strength especially early on in the game's timeline. Often regarded as a sustained attacker counterpart to Jinhsi's more burst-heavy nature, Camellya was a noticeable leap in attacking capability for the time she came out, whose potential was extensively tested and explored not just against the endgame at the time, but the new endgame mode that would arrive later down the road. She was a staple in Wuthering Waves' metagame for quite a while. But what about now? Having been just over a year since her advent, what happened to Camellya? Is she still doing well, or has her time in the spotlight come and gone? I just want to go on record to say I don't care how relevant Camellya is or isn't in the metagame because her mascot will forever be the face of Wuha and I will not be persuaded otherwise. I love that thing. On a more serious note, Camellya's situation closely resembles that of Jinhsi's during their respective release dates. Jinhsi coming out in version 1.1 was great timing due to being early enough for her talents and repertoire to be appreciated by all manner of players. Whether you were a free-to-play or a whale, early character infrastructure laid forth in version 1.0 and even shortly after in 1.2 painted Jinhsi in a very positive light, such that players had no excuse not to pull for her. Being the standard of DPS by which all other attackers have to measure up against, that in and of itself ended up being a strong selling point for today's subject, as one major distinction between Camellya and the units that came before her was staying power. The existing high-profile main attackers at the time, Calcaro, Encore, Jinhsi, Shangliao, and Jian shared a win condition wherein the goal was to charge up their forte circuit in Liberation, then tap into an Empower state where the bulk of their damage per rotation was contained. Effective as it was, on some occasions you'd run into a scenario where either A, the boss or enemy would be able to survive your full rotation, at which point you'd have to go through the tedious process of stalling for time to run the clock on your cooldowns, or B, some contingency would take place causing you to miss out on the full benefits of your power spike. For example, though Jian's ultimate afforded him no shortage of damage, the rather short duration of 10 seconds meant if the enemy he was up against had anything that would force him to waste precious time chasing them down, he'd also lose a measurable amount of damage. Camellya's arrival not only signified a new contender at the top of the DPS charts, but also a new approach to combat in general. To no one's surprise, her most noteworthy trait was her resonant skill, allowing her to switch between modes on a moderate cooldown. While in her Blossom mode, Camellya becomes suspended in the air and gains a new attack rotation with significantly increased area of effect. Notably distinct from other characters with AoE in their kit is that instead of attacking in a wide area in front of her, Camellya attacks all enemies around her, making it most ideal for you to be standing right in the middle of the pack if you're taking on groups of enemies. Unlike other attack rotations, this one could be cycled through from start to finish by simply holding the left mouse button, giving Camellya by far the simplest attack rotation in the game in terms of inputs. You just had to press skill then hold left click and the game would do all the work for you. If you were at all concerned about enemies interrupting her during her admittedly long attack sequence, there was some built-in safety for that as well. Once more, unlike other attackers before her who were mostly based on strong hits, Camellya's attacks were spread across dozens upon dozens of individual hits, each with the chance to parry enemy attacks. So while she's Beyblading the hell out of enemies, it comes with the added property of essentially auto-parrying most attacks in the game. That isn't to imply the other attackers are mechanically intensive, but a huge contributor to Camellya's popularity was due to how straightforward she was to play. More importantly, she was for most people the final damage dealer required to fully complete Tower of Adversity. Across most of version 1, the average player simply could not finish all 3 sections of TOA for the sheer fact that they lacked the means to do so. One tower could be held down by Jinhsi and another tower could be cleared by Shangliao. But unless you had Jian or a really decked out Encore, remaining options for who was able to adequately take on the last one were few and far between. Not to mention we were short on healers. Case in point, with the inclusion of Camellya, the general Wuha community had 3 fully distinct teams with 0 overlap. We had Jinhsi and Zhezhi, Shangliao and Yinlin, and Camellya and Sanhua. Speaking of teammates, that was another big benefit for Camellya. You could just throw in Sanhua, a character everyone had, and you'd have her best team right there. It was extremely easy to build her and get her moving very quickly, and the damage output Camellya brought with her was every bit Jinhsi's equal, oftentimes better depending on the situation. Camellya's ability to fight for extended periods of time thanks to her rotation being spread across her entire kit as opposed to concentrating within a small burst would prove to make her more consistent against bosses and groups of enemies alike. While there are flaws that became more apparent later down the road, that Camellya's attack rotation could exceed north of 20 seconds made her extremely useful in any situation that wasn't about trying to kill things quickly. For tacit fields or any material domains often featuring waves of enemies you could spin to win your way through without so much as caring about anything. For bosses, you'd be able to constantly parry their attacks whenever applicable and clear enemies that way. I don't know why I keep coming back to this, but just like Jinhsi, Camellya was amazing at fighting the stupid monkey because she could float above the ground and dodge his annoying earthquake attack while effortlessly parrying his grab and pound attack that would often result in a one-shot kill if you got hit by it. In essence, right out the gate, Camellya was in contention for the best attacker in the game. Funnily enough, even though she was more known for her persistent DPS, those who could afford her S2 were able to have their cake and eat it too, as their 4 empowered skill at full power could easily do over 500,000 damage. Version 2 would also be fairly generous to her. While not by that much of an increase, Rocha was brought in during the second half of 2.0 and was Camellya's best secondary throughout the year. Shortly after came the second endgame mode of Wuthering Waves, Whimpering Waves, a game mode that may as well have had Camellya's name written all over it. The premise of Wiwa was simple yet pronounced. Enemies would spawn in waves and would do so continuously until time ran out or you achieved the maximum number of points available. If ever there was a situation where you needed someone who could fight for a long time, it would be now. Carlotta mounted the throne of single target DPS, while Camellya quickly found her own little spot at the top, becoming without question the best character for Whimpering Waves, period. Whether by intention or coincidence, the Flower Girl was practically made for Wiwa, being able to fight endlessly with her skill and having 2 screen nukes to finish off the slightly bulkier waves. Whether you did or didn't have Rocha, this girl had no trouble locking down one of the 2 teams. If anything, even though you could play them together, it would be more prudent to have Rocha play with the other team to assist in clearing over there, further underscoring how much of an auto-win Camellya was for that game mode. She was allowed to enjoy the mantle for a while at that. Phoebe and Brant were both passing great for Wiwa, and Cantarella was also not all that impactful. Zani's more cleave-based attacks were enough to make her a worthwhile attacker, especially with Phoebe, but compared to the effortlessness of Camellya's rotation, no one could hold a candle to her. Even in 2.4 with Cardathia and Luba entering the mix, neither of them, even the former's overwhelming attack strength, were sufficient at knocking her down from the top. At least not yet anyway. 2.5 though was the farthest Camellya could go. The advent of Frolova was as damning to her as Carlotta was to Jinhsi, in more ways than one at that. First and foremost, while not relevant to gameplay whatsoever, the similarities between Frolova and Camellya character-wise were pretty apparent. Psycho Flower Girl number 1 meets Psycho Flower Girl number 2. But onto gameplay, both units are havoc. At the very least, are the Jinhsi Magistrate if and when you came across a glacier-resistant enemy that presented an opportunity where she could beat out Carlotta in opportunity cost, even if the latter was better in any other circumstance. In Camellya's case, Frolova representing the same attribute as her made it so there was constant overlap. Exacerbating things was that the Fraxidus member was in the exact same line of work as the Black Shores girl. To this very day, Frolova is bar none the single best character in Whimpering Waves and a possible contender for top 5 most valuable characters in Wuthering Waves as of version 3.1. Alongside boasting incredible damage output of her own, she can continue her attack rotation without being the active unit, making her the only character next to Chakona thus far to allow true off-field attacking in this game, subsequently reinforcing the damage of the active character. Other secondary units in this game contribute meaningful damage in their own right, but for the most part, with the exception of coordinated attacks, only during their time on field. Frolova, on the other hand, gets to apply pressure while you're playing someone else on the team, essentially making it so the only way for her to be contested is if there's another character who can do the same thing as her. Currently, there just isn't. Right then and there, Camellya's equity in the metagame decreased profoundly. The two aren't exactly one-to-one, yes, but nothing was as brutal of a blow to a character's meta relevance overnight than Frolova was to Camellya. I would wager the former's inclusion was more consequentially impactful to the latter than Shangliao was to Calcarl, and those two units are infamously compared to each other even now. Moreover, just like I iterated in the Jinhsi video, when it comes to success in a gacha game, you have to be at least one of two things, either be the best at something or the only one at something. Much of why Camellya had such a chokehold over the competition was because she was both the best at Wiwa and also really the only character made to handle Wiwa, besides maybe Jian. Everyone else at the time, Zani, Cardadia, Lupa, Brandt, they were only able to play in that game mode by way of their attacks conveniently having a bit of AoE in them. The second half of version 2 would bring in a couple new additions to the roster that would not just negate the only one at something, but the best at something as well. Like I said, it's impossible for Vrolova by her very design to not be good at Whimpering Waves. On field, she has excellent area coverage and damage output, and she can continue attacking enemies around her while you're playing on your other character. That property in and of itself allows any character to become a strong Wiwa unit if they're able to have Vrolova as a secondary, for instance Galbrena, who is mainly single target. That aside, there's also Augusta. Augusta's attacks are so massive in scale and frequency that even though technically she's meant to be just a general attacker, her base damage is a significant degree above Camellya's at this point, meaning she can kill enemies that much faster. By extension, that applies to most other attackers joining the fray. Enemies are steadily becoming more durable, meaning even with Camellya's consistent uptime, Wiwa is every bit a race against time as it is a test of endurance. For all the AoE coverage Camellya has, which to her credit is still among the best in the game even now, that's kind of a moot point if she takes too long to kill enemies. Characters like Aimia and Cardadia simply have more packing in every attack than her. Not just them either, GM for example has been holding on more steadily on account of getting more team support in the form of the likes of Iuna and also Vrolova. Less apparent, but the Monofusion team has also been holding on by nature of all 3 units dealing considerable damage. Individually speaking, while Camellya might be able to overshadow them one-on-one, in her best team, she's the only one dealing meaningful damage. You're not going to expect Rocha or Shorekeeper to help out much in that regard, whereas in Monofusion, everyone is attacking at full capacity. Now, you might be wondering, why not just put Camellya and Vrolova together? There's no explicit rule against that per se, rather pragmatically speaking, there's nothing incentivizing you to go out of your way to do that. Vrolova has plenty of other candidates to play with. Cantarella's a far better choice, and Cantarella isn't even really that much of an attacker. Actually wait no, there is something preventing Camellya and Vrolova from working together. Camellya has a long-ass rotation, Vrolova also has a long-ass rotation. There's no way the party boss of your third character like Shorekeeper and Verina would be able to hold out for the full length of both units, so in that way there is an implicit rule against them being played together. It has simply gotten to a point where the overall damage capability of Wuthering Waves has caught up to and exceeded the standards of version 1, of which Camellya is still bound to. And sharing an identical situation to Jinhsi, Camellya just hasn't received any targeted support in quite a while. Despite Luke having just come out a week or so ago, there's no new basic attack support nor Havoc support for that matter. The latest character specifically meant to boost Havoc damage is Cantarella, and for a variety of reasons, she and Camellya are not all that compatible with each other. Chisa is a Havoc unit and she does play into the Havoc attribute debuff Havoc Bane, but Camellya does not, rendering those two incompatible as well. To this day, Camellya still feels Sanhua as the best option for those who don't have Rocha, unless of course you decide to play the Lahai Roy wheelchair, which I believe now is Camellya's best team. Once again though, are you really going to allocate Linné and Mornier to Camellya when there's Aimia, Luke, Yuna, or multiple other units who can make far better use of them? Finally, more broadly speaking, recall when I mentioned earlier that Camellya can fight for extended periods of time without gassing out, making her perfect for a game mode like Whimpering Waves. Most if not all of the new attackers added to the game have ways to extend their rotation if needed. They may not be able to fight at full strength, but it's enough to get the job done. And, lest we forget, the meta has shifted over the past few months. Double Pawn Matrix is now the target endgame mode, and with the addition of 2 new chambers in the center tower of TOA, bossing is now back on top in priority, which evidently is not Camellya's specialty. Suffice to say, it will only get more difficult for the Psycho Flower Girl from here. Though in fairness, Camellya is not a bad character by any means. If you thoroughly invested in her when she came out, she's still relatively competitive. For example, my Camellya, even though I personally don't use her anymore since I have a bunch of other units, I'm certain if I brought her into Wiwa, she could still clear for one team if I set my mind to it. The only question is, how much longer can she hold on for? Even if they release more basic attack support, that would be of greater benefit for the likes of Luke, and if they released Havoc support, it would sooner help out Vrolova and Cantarella than Camellya. It's just a rough situation for her overall. Having said that, just like Jinhsi, Camellya's had a good time in the spotlight, so there's no shame in her slowly wilting away. A character should not be obligated to stay relevant forever, and Camellya's done more than enough for us to be worth the investment we put into her. What do you guys think though? Do you think she's still got what it takes to bloom again? Or is this it for the Psycho Flower Girl? Let me know in the comments down below. That'll be all for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'd like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Farsarum, join my Discord server, and check out my other What Happened to episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
線を解き放て。